Welcome once again to another episode of Coffee and Volter. In this episode then, we're going to talk about a very specific planet, Armageddon. In Warhammer 40,000 literature, there are certain very specific planets that are truly important. See Cadia, see Isvan, and see Armageddon. Especially because Armageddon is a cornerstone of what constitutes the defense of the solar sector. So, there have been hosts like Pinus there for millennia. So, it has had up to 3 wars as a planet called Armageddon. But it used to be called something else. So let's take a look. Armageddon is one of the Imperial Hive worlds and industrial world, located 10,000 light-years from the galactic northeast of Terra in the solar segment. It was the scene of several of the greatest conflicts ever fought by the Empire, including the First War for Armageddon against Chaos, and the Second and Third Wars for Armageddon against the immense Orc warlord Gathkul Mak-Uruk Traka. The world of Armageddon is the 4th planet in a star system made up of 10 worlds, and it is the industrial core of both the Armageddon subsector and the wider region that makes up the sector, Armageddon. Many of its worlds, within a radius of several light-years, depend on it for its enormous industrial production. Thousands of standard years of intense industrial activity have reduced the Armageddon area to desolate wastelands and polluted oceans. Humans can only survive within the artificial environment of the world's hive cities. The enormous structures, similar to archaeological sites, rise several kilometers high. And from the Imperial military installations, food must be imported from off the planet, and clean air and water are precious commodities. Due to the inhospitable environmental conditions that exist outside of hive cities, almost all regiments of the Armageddon Steel Legion of the Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard are trained as mechanized infantry operating from the relative safety of their vehicles. During the 13th Black Crusade in 999 of the 41st millennium, the fortress world of Cadia was destroyed, with much of the network of Cadian pillars destroyed by the Necrons. These pillars, built by the Necrons, had long prevented the Eye of Terror from naturally expanding towards the Cadian Gate, which was lost after Cadia fell to the forces of Abaddon the Despoiler. That ancient warp rift began to expand across the galaxy, opening the Despoiler's coveted Crimson Path to Terra and giving rise to the Great Rift. This Great Tear, in reality, also known as the Cicatrix Maledictum in High Gothic, was a warp storm of galactic scale that has split the galaxy in two, extending from the Eye of Terror to the Hadex anomaly on the eastern fringe. Through the influx of the enormous warp energies released at the birth of the Great Rift, Armageddon has been transformed into a hell. Demonic armies dedicated to the service of Khorne and Tzeentch swept the battlefields, no longer bound by the laws of reality. Luckily for the Imperial forces that remained on the world after the Third War for Armageddon, including 25 regiments of the Astra Militarum and elements of 9 Adeptus Astartes chapters, and for their greenskin opponents, a variety of unknown clans, the demonic legions were as willing to fight amongst themselves as they were to hunt down and eradicate the mortal survivors. Imperial reinforcements led by elements of 9 Astartes chapters with the Salamanders in overall command recently managed to stop a demonic ritual that would have brought back Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters, to the world that had defied him during the First War for Armageddon. But let's start with its history because it is truly interesting and very curious. We're going to start with the Ulanor Crusade. The origins of this industrial hive world have been lost to modern imperial scholars. But in reality, the history of this vitally important imperial world dates back some 10 millennia to the final years of the Great Crusade, during the great campaign known as the Ulanor Crusade. A vast imperial assault was launched against Ulanor Prime, seat of the Orc Empire of the Overwarlord Urlak Uruk, the largest greenskin empire ever encountered in human history up to that point. The crusade included the deployment of 100,000 Astartes from the Luna Wolves, White Scars, and Ultramarines legions, 8 million troops of the Imperial Army, 100 Titans of the Legio Mortis, and 600 starships of the Imperial Navy. and their support personnel. The Ulanor Crusade marked the culmination of the immense effort of the Great Crusade to reunite the scattered colonial worlds of humanity under the rule of the Emperor after the Age of Strife. Under the guidance of the unparalleled strategic mind of the commander of the Luna Wolves, the Primarch Horus Lupercal, the gigantic orc overwarlord was defeated and the greenskin forces scattered. After this monumental victory, a great imperial triumph was held, remembered as the Triumph of Ulanor, for the participating forces. It was there that the Emperor of Mankind announced he would no longer lead the Great Crusade and that he intended to return to Terra. In his place, to command the vast forces of humanity, he left the Primarch Horus. Horus was granted the newly created rank of War Master and assumed command authority over all his Primarch brothers, and over every expeditionary fleet of the Great Crusade, sowing the seeds of dissent, pride, and hurt feelings that would eventually grow and erupt into a total civil war during the Horus Heresy. Let's now move forward 2,000 years. The War of the Beast. Almost 1,500 standard years later, in 544 of the 32nd millennium, an enormous Orkwage, led by a mysterious warlord known only as the Beast, ravaged the Imperium, growing in size to become the largest greenskin invasion the galaxy had known to date, even eclipsing the one defeated by Horus on Ulanor Prime at the height of the Great Crusade. The Beast centered its empire on the long-forgotten world of Ulanor Prime, which by then had been heavily urbanized by the industrious greenskins, who covered almost the entire planet with surprisingly well-organized settlements. The seat of the Beast's empire was the Orc capital city of Gorkograd. Built inside an enormous Gargan temple, on the exact spot where the Emperor and the Primarchs had gathered during the Triumph of Ulanor more than a millennium earlier. The Beast's intention was to use Ulanor Prime as a template to perfect the Orc concept of the attack moon, turning the entire planet into a mobile battle station capable of teleporting through the multidimensional realm known only to them as subspace. The Beast intended to use Ulanor Prime to destroy Terra itself, eliminating the home world of the species that had long been the Greenskins' greatest enemy. After the world of Ulanor Prime was identified as the original home of the Beast and its enormous Wah, Vulcan, the immortal, perpetual, and long-lost Primarch of the Salamander's Legion, led the first invasion of Ulanor. Alongside him, the Astartes chapters of Rogal Dorn's lineage, who were part of the defense initiative for Terra known as the Last Wall, invaded the Beast's capital world, focusing on the capital city of Gorkograd. As the battle concluded, Vulcan charged toward the enormous Gargan temple of the Beast, intending to face the Orc warlord alone. During their confrontation, Vulcan destroyed the Gargan temple in a massive explosion that seemed to annihilate both Vulcan and the Beast. This shattered the Greenskins' cohesion, and their resistance collapsed after the defeat of their powerful warlord. However, unbeknownst to the Imperial forces, the Greenskin presence secretly endured on Ulanor Prime. Finally, a second invasion of Ulanor Prime was launched by the Imperium, which included several battered Adeptus Astartes chapters, the newly created Death Watch, several regiments of the Astra Militarum, Frateris Templar, Scitari cohorts, and the Legio Cybernetica. Several houses of Imperial Knights, Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, a small cohort of Sisters of Silence, and one Warlord-class Titan and another Warhound class. Not the 100 Titans from the Horus Heresy, now only 2. During the second assault on the city of Gorkograd, an elite assassination force, composed of several Astartes and other Imperial support forces, discovered that there were actually 6 beasts, each one a prime orc. A beast in its own right and commander of its own legion of greenskins. In a parody of the Emperor, his Primarchs, and the ancient Space Marine legions when they conquered Ulanor Prime. When Kurland, the Lord Commander of the Imperium and the sole surviving member of the original Imperial Fists chapter, was assassinated, the Imperial forces were forced to flee with the body of their fallen commander and retreat from Ulanor. The third time's the charm, we suppose. Not long after this defeat, Maximus Thane, the chapter master of the Fists Exemplar, led the final and desperate Imperial campaign of the War of the Beast during the third invasion of Ulanor. the Imperial forces launched redirected asteroids as weapons of mass destruction to devastate the planet, which was in the hands of the orcs. With the help of the Sisters of Silence and a looted greenskin, the null effect of the Silent Sisters combined with the powers of the looted one, creating a reverse Wa effect that completely devastated the greenskin hordes of the beast. During this final confrontation, the beast was, at last, slain. After the conclusion of the War of the Beast, Maximus Thane assumed command of the Imperial Fists. He was elected the new Lord Commander of the Imperium by the Senatorum Imperialis, and ordered the Adeptus Mechanicus to execute an exterminatus on Ulanor Prime to erase its memory from history and prevent a new beast from emerging. And now, this is where it gets interesting. However, the Adeptus Mechanicus was reluctant to carry out the order, as its tech priests knew that Ulanor was rich in unclaimed alien technology that had brought the Imperium to the brink of collapse. For the servants of the Machine God, the acquisition of knowledge prevailed over all other considerations. Coveting Ulanor Prime and its xeno-secrets for themselves, Fabricator General Kubik acted directly against the orders of the Lord Commander. By reverse engineering the Orc teleportation technology that had been used to move the attack moons through subspace. During the recent conflict, the Adeptus Mechanicus managed to secretly teleport the entire world of Ulanor Prime through the warp to a new location on the edge of the Segmentum Solar. The uninhabited star system where Ulanor was moved had already been marked for colonization by the Imperium. The Fabricator General informed the High Lords of Terra that the Orc world had been thrown into the heart of a nearby blue supergiant. Ulanor no longer existed. Next, the Fabricator General began dismantling Ulanor Prime to its core, extracting all useful Xenos technology. No trace of the Orc presence would be left on the world that could reveal the truth of the Mechanicus' deception, should the planet later be explored or colonized by the Imperium. In just a few standard centuries, the world once known as Ulanor became a prime location for human settlement due to its pristine condition and its strategic location in the Segmentum Solar. Once colonized, Ulanor came to be known by a new name, one that would resonate through the millennia and become a decisive point of contention between the greenskin races and humanity. It became Armageddon. But anyway, once Armageddon became Armageddon, what happened there over the next 8,000 years? Well, let's start with the First War for Armageddon. The First War for Armageddon is perhaps the least known of the conflicts fought on the world, and probably for a good reason. Chaos cultists who worshipped the Chaos god Khorne started a rebellion against the planet's imperial government during a warp storm they themselves had summoned. Soon, a great space hulk appeared over the planet, containing none other than Angron, the demon prince of Khorne, who had once been the primarch of the traitor legion of the World Eaters. The demonic legions and chaos cultists quickly pushed the Imperial defenders back in an orgy of blood, until help arrived in the form of the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights, Space Marines. With the Space Wolves reinforcing the planetary defenses, the Grey Knights fought their way to the center of the demonic horde, finally banishing Angron and his army from the material world back into the warp, leaving the cultists to be crushed by the Imperial counterattack. But a final tragedy was destined to strike the planet. To preserve the secret of the demon Primarch's existence, the entire population of Armageddon, as well as all surviving soldiers, was rounded up, sterilized, and sentenced by the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition to Imperial Adeptus Arbitis labor camps for the rest of their lives, while a new population was brought in to repopulate the planet. Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf, Chapter Master of the Space Wolves, has never forgiven the Inquisition for carrying out such a betrayal against the men and women who fought for their world against the hordes of chaos. And with good reason. We now continue with the Second War for Armageddon. The Cradle of Sebastian Yarrick. The second invasion of Armageddon was a massive orc force that arrived in 941 of the 41st millennium, led by the powerful warlord Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka. The Imperial Planetary Governor, Overconsul Hermann von Straub, was completely unprepared for the attack, and his own pride and incompetence only worsened the situation. Ultimately, the defense of the planet was taken over by Commander Luis Dante of the Blood Angels Space Marines. During the war, a commissar named Sebastian Yarrick, assigned to the Armageddon Steel Legion, had been exiled to Hades Hive by Overconsul von Straub simply to stop him from bothering the planetary governor about preparing the world's defenses. However, Yarrick led a heroic defense in that Hive city. He gathered and commanded an effective militia to supplement the Imperial Guard troops, which ultimately distracted Gazgukul, enraging him so much by the Hive's resistance to the Orc attack that he sent more and more forces against Hades Hive, pulling them from other fronts. The battle for Hades Hive escalated to the point that Gazgukul considered the fight a matter of personal pride, and he personally took command of the Greenskin forces assaulting the Hive city. This blinded him to the other battles on the planet, allowing the Imperial defenders to make important strategic advances. Although the Hive city eventually fell to the Orcs, the distraction gave Imperial forces enough time to mount a counterattack that finally broke the back of the invading Orc forces. Commissar Yarrick survived and would go on to face Gazgukul again. Von Straub escaped his jailers, but his vehicle was found destroyed and the disgraced planetary governor was missing, presumed killed at the hands of the Greenskins. And yet the Orcs would return once more. As a side note, in 1992, Games Workshop released Battle for Armageddon, a board game that detailed the events of the Second War for Armageddon. The events of that war also served as the backdrop for the starter set of the second edition of Warhammer 40,000. 57 standard years, to be exact, after the first attempt to conquer Armageddon, Gazgukul Thraka led a second Orc War against the planet in 998 of the 41st millennium, unleashing the Third War for Armageddon. Commissar Yarrick and many of the heroes who had previously fought in the planet's defense were once again called to battle. The conflict ultimately ended in a stalemate, with neither side managing to take full control of the world. Although the cost in lives and resources was immense, Armageddon would need many solar decades, if not centuries, to recover from the war. Although the Third War for Armageddon has ended with a narrow Imperial victory, the fighting still continues on the planet. Gazgukul has abandoned the world, pursued by the forces of Commissar Yarrick's Astra Militarum, accompanied by Marshal Helbrecht, with an entire crusade of Black Templars in his wake. But the Orcs from all over the galaxy have come to see Armageddon as a kind of Valhalla, a sacred place for their race, where one can always go to find a good fight, and the Imperium must continue to send more troops into battle to keep the planet within the Emperor's domain. Alright, let's now talk about contemporary events after the Great Rift. For much of the 41st millennium, Armageddon has been a battlefield. First, it was invaded by the Servants of Chaos, commanded by the Daemon Primarch Angron during the First War for Armageddon. It was later the stage for two massive wars between the Orc hordes of Gazgukul Thraka and the forces of the Imperium during the Second and Third Wars for Armageddon. Although the infamous Greenskin warlord abandoned the planet during the Third War for Armageddon to establish what he called the Great War, the Greenskin assault continued. Not even the great warp storms unleashed by the birth of the Great Rift in the year 999 of the 41st millennium could stop the fighting, though they did change its nature. During the period of the Noctis Aeterna, reinforcements were cut off for both sides, and those heading to the system were swept away into nothingness. The combatants who remained on Armageddon were forced to face not only each other, but also waves of demons. At times, the defenders were so desperate that Orcs and humans fought shoulder to shoulder against the greater threat. Such temporary truces never lasted long. When the light of the Astronomicon shone once more and travel through the Immaterium was again possible, an Imperial relief force arrived to find the landscape of Armageddon profoundly changed. At the height of the warp storms, the demonic forces of Tzinch and Khorne had fought each other as part of their eternal competition in the Great Game. The Orcs and Imperial defenders sought refuge while Titanic greater demons battled for supremacy. Half of the planet was transformed into a hellscape reminiscent of many demon worlds. A nightmare born of the warp fused with the ruins of a war-torn hive world. The Imperial reinforcements, led by elements from 9 Space Marine chapters, with the Salamanders once again in command, managed to stop a demonic ritual that would have brought Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters, back to the world that had defied him during the First War for Armageddon. Alright, to wrap up, let's talk a bit about the geography of this planet, although we already know half of it has become a demon planet, but oh well, what was it like before? Well, there were 3 main land masses on Armageddon. Most of the human life is found on the main continent, which is divided into 2 parts, Armageddon Prime and Armageddon Secundus, separated by the dense strip of jungle known simply as the Equatorial Jungle. Each had its own roles in the war for Armageddon, but most of the fighting took place on the main continent. Most of the information presented here on the geography of Armageddon will be limited to that provided by the areas dedicated to the fighting during the Third War for Armageddon. The main expanses of the subcontinents of Armageddon Prime and Armageddon Secundus are covered in ash deserts, a consequence of millennia of industrial pollution. Several hive cities house the planet's human population and its industry. Among them are Tempestora, Deathmire, and Volcanus on Armageddon Prime, and Infernus, Hades, Acheron, and Hell's Reach, who could forget Hell's Reach, and Tartarus on Armageddon Secundus. To the north of Armageddon Prime and Secundus lie the Fire Wastes, home to the mining and resource-gathering industries that sustain the factories of the hive cities. This is an extremely arid region that has been exploited far beyond the point where it could sustain any living ecosystem. To the south of the main continent lie the Deadlands, covered in ice. The contaminated ice is melted and intensely purified to provide a source of drinking water for the inhabitants of Armageddon's hives. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Coffee and Bolter, in which we've tried to break down the history of this planet, which is extremely important in the lore of Warhammer 40,000. In fact, supplements have even been released for these wars, for the wars for Armageddon, you know. So, well, we found it quite interesting, and we'll bring other planets. Cadia is out there, and there's a lot to talk about it, even if there's nothing but rock left. And well, we invite you to give us a like, to comment, and if you can, please share it. And we'll be waiting for you on Patreon, where you can paint all kinds of miniatures at all levels. So, see you there.